congratulations on the film.
Thank you so much.
It covers a lot of ground, not just sackler activism and the opioid crisis, but also Nan Goldin and her personal history and her work. So I think maybe as an entry point, what was your first point of contact for making this film? Was it one of those elements and then it broadened out?
Sure. As an artist, I've known Nan's work and you know how groundbreaking it was from the '80s. I'd seen the book, I've seen the slideshow many times, and it's always been sort of, I think, an inspiration, like what she created, both for narrative storytelling, for cinema. I mean, so many cinematographers talk about the sort of palette that she uses and sort of drawing inspiration from that. So of course I knew her work. We had met at some occasions. It was a film festival, so we knew each other, but we weren't friends. And then she created Pain, and she started doing these actions, and I had read about them, so I wasn't involved at the beginning. Nan, when she created Pain, she, as you see in the film, she wrote this declaration in art form, and then in March she did the action at the Met, and they at that point she was like, we need to document everything and make a film. And then we had breakfast together about a year and a half later. She told me about the film, and I was thrilled because I had been following it, and I was so thrilled that an artist with the kind of power she had was leveraging her power in the way she was to hold the Sackler family accountable. And I just thought it was an amazing story. So I just remember being really thrilled. And then I learned in the course of that meeting she was looking for others to join the project, including Howard Gertler, who I'd known since we'd worked together on Split Screen with John Pearson. And she asked about him as a producer. I said he'd be perfect. He did How to Survive a Plague, which is also incredible in terms of archival material and it's showing activism, like kind of blueprint for activism and how direct action. Anyway, and then I sort of volunteered. I kind of got in, and so that was the sort of entry point. So the entry point was knowing about the activism that Nat was doing, and it was in a lot of ways similar to previous films I've made. An individual portrait, kind of confronting power.
Activism, but also a deeply personal film, and I like the fact that it's the activism that started you connecting, and then you deepened in. Do you? Some people say it's a blend of the personal and the political, but I want to put that to you: is everything personal, political, and vice versa? Do you make a distinction like that?
If you look at Nan's artwork, and you have Maggie Smith, who looked at her films. The woman who owns Tin Pan Alley. I love that she was the one who's like, this is profoundly political, and so deeply personal. To answer the question, I guess I would say that there are very few artists, I think, that go to the sort of personal depth that Nan does, and I do think it's profoundly political. And I definitely felt that, anytime you start a project, you have to feel that you're the right filmmaker for it, and you have to be able to contribute something. And, I was super nervous, like Nan's force. I was nervous, like, okay, what can I contribute, and how to tell this story that, would provide insight. And it was, I don't consider it a biography. I think that I consider it a portrait. And the kind of, my films often follow like a contemporary through line, like some sort of drama that's unfolding in real time. That's the kind of filmmaking I really love to do. And then the personal, and the sort of, as we began working, other layers kind of revealed themselves.
It seems to me in your interviews, which are very revealing with her, that she almost wanted to unburden herself of some of this stuff. That she wanted it. Did you have to gain her trust, or was this a moment where she felt like she wanted to talk about it?
I don't want to speak for Nan. We definitely, yes. In terms of, there's a lot of trust that was needed for the kind of intimacy that you hear in, when she talks about her work, and that happened. When I started the film, we hadn't done any interviews, and I never really thought like, oh, I'm going to, set up a camera and lights and do a master interview or something. That just didn't seem that it was going to, lend itself to the kind of intimacy. But we did the first interview, and it was the interview that you hear when she's talking about, teenage years and being sent to foster care and meeting David Armstrong. It was so emotional for me to like, what she was sharing. But it was also kind of like we went to like a really deep emotional place really quickly, and then we had to sort of just step back and say, well, that's intense. And we built some ways that she and I could speak freely, and then sort of agree that later she could, have the opportunity to listen before anyone else heard, and to make sure that there wasn't anything that was just too personal. So that's kind of, I think, how the trust was built. And that was done very much with participant, and particularly Diane Weyerman. I mean, the film is dedicated to her memory, and this film wouldn't exist without Diane. And she was very supportive that we needed sort of safety nets around because of the emotional depth.
Mm-hmm. Something else that your film does that I really love is that we see Nan's work. You create like mini installations almost interspersed throughout your film, which feels somewhat new for you. I wonder if there is an element to this project that you felt you would grow as a filmmaker.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I mean, I mean, I do feel that this, every film is there are certain things you bring to it, and then there's certain things that the people you work with allow for, and again, this kind of emotional depth and and bravery of Nan allowed for, I think, an emotional, something that really goes someplace that I haven't, and in my previous work, and that is, this, very much a collaboration with Nan. And we, the structure, I mean, this is very much like every piece of film is a collaboration. And, the editors who, made this possible, I mean, Joe Beanie, extraordinary editor, Amy Foote, and Nan was also involved, like sort of in the later stages once we had a rough cut, she watched, and then we went in and deepened a lot of things that she felt like she wanted to go deeper into, so Cookie Mueller or David Armstrong.
You're doing a service for contemporary art, and that whole scene, that whole New York scene, it's great. It's an education in that. I'm struck by how moved I was by the film and how emotional it was for me. It seems to me like everyone has a story about the opioid crisis. That's how consequential it is. Do you see the film as an opportunity for discussion to happen about that subject that's so often stigmatized?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, both, addiction, opioid crisis, sex work. Nan talks about. I mean, she talks about this. The reason she's willing to talk about these very personal things is to destigmatize, and not just to destigmatize, but pain would often talk about, like, we need to shift the shame from, towards the Sacklers, right? That the shame needs to be, it's like misplaced, and Nan says that at the end of the film that the wrong things are kept secret, and I absolutely agree. And so I think what Payne was doing is trying to, like, okay, well, the people who need to be shamed are, the people who are profiting, and, knowing that, that they're creating a product that's killing people. This has killed a generation, and it's been known, like the way that this drug has been, promoted to doctors and abused was known from the early, 2000s. I mean, journalists have been reporting on this, and then the idea that it could continue, getting back to another one of your questions in terms of like how to approach this, I mean, anytime you make a documentary, it also exists within sort of a context. And so the fact that there were journalists like Patrick Radden Keefe or Barry Meyer and other filmmakers, I mean, Alex Gibney has made work, and a lot of other filmmakers have made work about the crisis, which kind of then like allows me to sort of, it's there, but I'm assuming also that the audience is bringing something, and that what I felt was really unique was being able to do a portrait of Nan, and then also a kind of deep dive into, activism, like what is the, the sparks or that makes it effective, and how can it be a bit of a blueprint? Again, Howard Gertler's How to Survive a Plague is an example of, you see how it happens, not just the results of a direct action.
Right, and the change at the end is so profound. I wonder if what does Nan think of the film? Did you show her the cut before, and were you worried about that reaction?
Well, those are two separate questions. I'm terrified. of course, she's seen it. I mean, she's seen it many times. I mean, we did the interviews, we did a rough cut, and then we showed it with her. I mean, I think it's important. Like, this is hard. It's just hard for her to trust somebody else. It includes her art. Her art has been about her life. And she's contributed, at every step of the way. Like, and we felt, like I felt, the editing team felt that, the way that Nan talks about how she works with the people she photographs, that it is a collaborative, that she lets people tear something up if it's, there is this kind of collaborative, that there was an imperative that this filmmaking also be in that spirit, which doesn't mean, I'm still the director, I had the final cut on the film, but it was collaborative, and she brought so much to the film at every stage. But I don't want to speak for her. So I think I hope she's proud. That's all I can say. Yeah.
And just maybe as a general question for us to conclude, we look backward in your film to the history. We also look forward in terms of how we can make a change as viewers and participants. What's more important to you when we exit a film? Is taking it with you? Is it like a tool, something that you can use?
I always think going forward. I have some ambivalence about even like storytelling. Like, I don't want the audience to leave with a sense of closure, and they've had some cathartic experience that like exists within a dark room, and then they move out into the world and it doesn't bleed in, right? Like, I want the work to bleed into people's lives and not sort of tie things up too neatly. I felt that very strongly with Citizen 4, like, and with this film. Like, I do. When I was working with Joe Beanie, I was like, I want people to think differently about a lot of things, on the most personal level and on a political level in terms of how they move in the world.
This film's definitely making us think differently. Let's thank our guests.
Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed it.
Great. Thank you.